Good to see you. So I was gonna just ask real quick, what has been going on in Israel and the Middle East this week is rather interesting. The Hamas basically is being routed out all over Gaza. Israel is um, moving pumps to pump the Mediterranean seawater into these underground canals to basically shut that whole thing down. And meanwhile, the international cry keeps getting worse and worse. What's going on in the north of Israel? Yeah, they demolished Gaza City, but also Hezbollah is still threatening from the north. Iran is still threatening. So the situation keeps getting escalated, of course, and we're heavily involved as well. So all of Israel's enemies are sort of crowding around her constantly. And I always want to keep that in the forefront, that's why we're looking at this, is to figure out how we got there. So we're now going to pick up basically in the early 50s, right after World War II, that West Germany made a huge decision, being half the country that it was, that these evils that were done to the Jews needed to be accounted for in some way. So they set up a plan to basically say, okay, we know we took all your property, we killed 6 million Jews. How can we financially assist you as a new country since you've taken in all these refugees? It was a very interesting question. As you can imagine, the audience in Israel was united on this decision or highly divided? Very divided. Most people said, if you take anything from them, you've taken blood money. How can you put a price on one individual? And so that's what it really came down to, was how much per person would this monetarily mean? It's an incredible story. So according to the website of Conferences of Jewish Material Claims Against Germany, or Claims Conference, in response to the calls from Jewish organizations in the state of Israel in September 1951, Chancellor Konrad Adenauer of West Germany addressed his parliament. Unspeakable crimes have been committed in the name of the German people, calling for moral and material indemnity. The federal government are prepared, jointly with representatives of the Jewry and the state of Israel, to bring about a solution of material indemnity problem, thus easing the way to the spiritual resettlement and infinite suffering. So Germany was looking at it as, we've done all these evils, how can we help? Because Israel as a nation has taken in all these refugees. Israel was divided, and one camp was like, we desperately need the money for infrastructure, to build hospitals and roads and schools, because if we don't have this money, there'll be no way to do that. And then the other side was like, we can never have any relationship with West Germany. We shouldn't accept any money from them. And it was a very different camp. So it's very interesting that this happened. I always think it's interesting, because when the Jews left Egypt, did they leave empty-handed? No, they took great wealth when they left the country. When they left Babylon and came home, what was the story? I'm sorry? They had wealth when they returned from Babylon. They left with nothing, but they came back with something. And the same thing is a bit true when they come back after the Holocaust. So, hold on. He's getting to you.
The East Germans were under control of Russia. Did they offer anything too?
They couldn't, no. Not as far as I know. So 1 month after Adenauer's speech, Nahum Goldman, the co-chair of the Jewish Agency for Israel and president of the World Jewish Congress, convened in a meeting in New York City with 23 major Jewish national and international organizations. The participants made clear that these talks would be limited to discussion of the material claims, and thus the organization that emerged from the meeting was called the Conference on Jewish Material Claims Against Germany. the Claims Conference. The board of directors and the new conference consisted of groups that took from its formation, with each member agency designating 2 members to the board. The Claims Conference had a task of negotiating with German government a program of indemnification and material damage to Jewish individuals, to the Jewish people caused by Germany through the Holocaust. So, I mean, what an amazing task is, like, how do you determine how much either a human life is worth, how much a refugee needs to receive, or how much we've taken and the Jews have lost? Can I get a reader for this one? Thank you, Daniel.
Israel was intent on taking what remained of Europe Jewry. Israel was also recovering from the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, and was facing a deep economic crisis, which led to a policy of austerity. Unemployment was very high, especially in the Mamabarat camps, and foreign currency reserve were scarce. David Ben-Gurion and his party, Mapai, took a practical approach and argued that accepting the agreement was the only way to sustain the nation's economy. There are 2 approaches, he told the Mapai Central Committee. One is the ghetto Jews approach, and the other is of an independent people. I don't want to run after a German and spit in his face. I don't want to run after anybody. I want to sit here and build here. I am not going to go to America to take part in a vigil against Adenauer.
So very interesting that Ben-Gurion was very forward-thinking. He's like, we need this now. It's a financial crisis. Our people are unemployed. We can't pay for infrastructure. So he basically was the one who worked very closely with Adenauer and against the committee. So negotiations were held between Israel and the foreign minister, Moshe Sharett, and the West German Chancellor, Konrad Adenauer. In 1951, Israel authorities made a claim for the 4 powers occupying post-war Germany regarding compensation and reimbursement based on the fact that Israel had absorbed and resettled 500,000 Holocaust survivors. They claimed that since absorption had cost $3,000 per person, equivalent to $31,300 in sort of today's terms, they were owed $1.5 billion, equivalent to $15.7 billion in 2021 by Germany. So basically, they based it on the number of refugees coming back because there was no way to do it. What I find so fascinating is all of the stuff that was confiscated. A lot of it was put in copper mines in the north of Germany and held there. The Allied powers were like trying to get to it first. The Americans were trying to make sure the Russians didn't get a hold of it. And it was paintings, it was artwork, it was gold, it was all kinds of precious objects that was confiscated from the Jews. But that wasn't even part of this. It was basically all focused on what was left. Can I get a reader for this one? Jacob?
They also figured that $6 billion worth of Jewish property had been pillaged by the Nazis, but stressed the Germans could never make up for what they did with any type of material recompense. Negotiations leading to the reparations agreement between Israel and West Germany began in March 1952 and were conducted between representatives of the government of the Federal Republic, the government of the State of Israel, and representatives of the World Jewish Congress, headed by Dr. Goldman. These discussions led to a bitter controversy in Israel as the coalition government headed by David Ben-Gurion claimed that reparations were necessary to restore what was stolen from the victims of the Holocaust.
So they paid them back in the end around 1.5 billion, but they estimated that they stole more than $6 billion worth of material. So it's an interesting number that you've got 6 million that were killed, $6 billion worth of stuff that was taken, and a return of 1.5 billion in the end. But this is a church, I believe, in Germany, showing you all of the things that were confiscated and boxed up that were taken from the Jews. This is the next one. Can I get a reader for that?
The agreement was signed by Adenauer and Moshe Sharett on September 10th, 1952 at Luxembourg City Hall. The German parliament, Bundestag, passed the agreement on March 18, 1953 by a large majority, 239 for and 35 against, though only 106 of the ruling CDU, CSU's 214 MPs supported the motion, which relied on the unanimous support of the opposition Social Democrats to get through. The Arab League strongly opposed the motion and threatened a boycott of the Federal Republic of Germany after it passed the restitution agreement, and the plan was abandoned due to economic considerations, namely that the Arab League would suffer far more from losing trade with the West Germany than West Germany would from the Arab League.
Yeah, they're always threatening that. It's like, if you make a deal and help the Jews, we're gonna come after you. And it was like, we don't need you. This is going ahead anyway. So this is a very interesting infographic, two of them actually, about the population of Israel since 1948. And I think it's helpful. It's gone straight up in this vector, as you can see. They've got over 8 million today, and it just keeps growing. And this is the other piece of the pie, which is the world Jewish population in the United States, Israel, and around the rest of the world. So there's still quite a lot to come back from Russia and Ukraine, but they are coming in. So now we're going to talk about the Suez Crisis. Has anybody seen the movie The Crown? Sorry, the series, The Crown. Okay, yeah. It covers the Suez War extremely well, and it shows you what happened. So Churchill was the prime minister before this happened, and the next prime minister was always itching for Churchill to get out of there and let him have a chance to be the prime minister, and it just completely fell apart. So in 1956, this is when basically there was a new power. President Nasser of Egypt was in charge, and he gave a very famous speech, and he gave a code word out, and then everybody who was working for him seized the Suez Canal, which belonged to whom? The Suez belonged to the British. They built it in the 1860s. It was one of the most significant and important pieces for international commerce ever done, besides the Panama Canal. So they seized power of it, and the British were very angry, so they thought, we're going to remove all of our pilots, the boats. So they took all the pilot boats away, so that they thought, okay, you won't be able to get your boats through the Suez Canal because we've removed this, because you seized the whole canal and the canal company. So what happened was Russia stepped in, and they gave them pilots, and they said, here you go, this is your independence, it belongs to you now. So what is really fascinating, because I've always thought, why doesn't Israel create its own canal? Why doesn't Israel create its own canal that goes out to the Red Sea? Because they easily could. It was fascinating because I found several articles that the CIA was working with Israel to do this and to create a separate canal that would go out from the Mediterranean to the Jordan, and then from the Jordan straight down the Jordan to the Dead Sea, and out through the bottom of the Dead Sea out to the Gulf of Aqaba. So it would have been absolutely incredible if that had happened. What happened with this in the Suez Crisis was Great Britain made a deal, because the pilot thing didn't work, it backfired. So they made a deal secretly with France and with Israel. And they were like, okay, here's our game plan. Israel, you're gonna attack the Suez Canal. We'll swoop in and defend the situation. But they didn't talk to America, they didn't talk to any of their other allies. As a matter of fact, they never notified the UN or anybody else of their intent to plan. And so it really fell apart. So it was the 29th was Israeli paratroopers dropped into the town of Suez. More paratroopers dropped into the Milta Pass, and troops continuing to cross into the border. Then the British land on the 5th, and the French and the Israelis capture the Gulf of Aqaba. And then the French Anglo invasion starts its bombardment. And then right after that is when the UN troops land at Port Said, and then the British and French forces have to withdraw. So it was a very quick time frame from October through December, going into 1957. What this did, hopefully this video will show correctly. It was a staging, I think, it was a precursor for what was going to happen in 1967, the Six-Day War. They learned, okay, we can take the whole Sinai Peninsula and even go into Egypt. So this was really important and gave them confidence that they could actually defend themselves. So, Walter, do you know if this video is going to work okay? Sound-wise, I mean. Can you hear it?
The Suez Canal, storm center of controversy for weeks, now becomes a cause of war in a lightning sequence of diplomatic and military moves. Since its seizure and nationalization by President Nasser of Egypt, the vital waterway has precipitated a new crisis in the already tense Middle East. Crack French units are embarked at Marseille, bound for a joint staging area with Great Britain on Cyprus, less than an hour's flight from Egyptian ports, where they are prepared for seizure of the canal by force. Simultaneously, Britain reinforces its garrison on the island for the same eventuality. A naval concentration in the eastern Mediterranean strengthens the military buildup, even as Israel, in a lightning attack, thrusts deep into Egypt to the vicinity of the canal. France and Britain issue a 12-hour ultimatum that all fighting must cease. Within hours of its expiration, Britain's warplanes are winging their way to Egypt, and its bombers attack 5 key cities, including Cairo. Following a Security Council veto by Britain and France of a United States motion for a ceasefire, President Eisenhower, after consultation with Secretary of State Dulles, makes a firm declaration of United States policy.
The United States was not consulted in any way about any phase of these actions, nor were we informed of them in advance. In the circumstances I have described, there will be no United States involvement in these present hostilities. I therefore have no plan to call the Congress in special session. Of course, we shall continue to keep in contact with congressional leaders of both parties. It is our hope and intent this matter will be brought before the United Nations General Assembly. There, with no veto operating, the opinion of the world can be brought to bear in our quest for a just end to this tormenting problem. In the past, the United Nations has proved able to find a way to end bloodshed. We believe it can and that it will do so again.
The whole question is brought before an emergency session of the General Assembly, where it faces the bar of world opinion.
Sorry, let's go on to the next one. So the end result of this is what you really need to hang your hat on. There was agreement between France and England and Israel. And they said, okay, we did this for you. We went into Egypt, we took the Suez, now it's all over, you didn't get it back. We want to make sure we have assurances if our ships are attacked or we're attacked by these nations, the Arab states, we want you to come to our defense. So they were expecting that to happen in 1967, and they called on France and other countries, and they basically told them 1956 isn't 1967. That was their answer. Really cold and just a total rebuff. So we're coming into the beginning of the 1960s, and it was a more prosperous time for Israel finally. But this trial of Adolf Eichmann was incredible. It was groundbreaking because Israel sent their forces into Argentina to capture Adolf Eichmann, hold him there, sneak him out of the country, bring him back to Israel, put him on trial for all the crimes of World War II, basically. He was the logistician architect of the entire war. He planned and executed building and shipping Jews to all of the work camps and death camps. And as the situation unfolded and Germany was losing the war, he was the one who sort of stepped things up and got it to the finish line. He was captured and was supposed to go to trial in Nuremberg, but he escaped, and he eventually moved down to South America, and he worked at a Mercedes-Benz plant and changed his name. What is absolutely fascinating is that his, I believe it was his grandson, fell in love with a girl he didn't know was Jewish. And when she was invited over to the family dinner, she recognized him. And then she contacted the right people who contacted Israel and told them, we think we have Adolf Eichmann because he's dating his son is dating a Jewish girl that he didn't know was Jewish. And it's just absolutely fascinating to me that, you know, God's hand is in it all. He really does find a way to get through all this. So can I get a reader for the slide? But the capture and trial, actually, Ben Kingsley plays the actor if you watch the show about it. Yeah.
Un momentito, senor. They're the only 3 words Israeli intelligence Peter Malkin knew in Spanish, but they were about to change the course of history. Malkin uttered the words to a balding Mercedes-Benz factory worker headed home from work on May 11, 1960. And when the man reluctantly acknowledged him, Malkin sprang into action. With the help of 3 other secret agents, he wrestled the man to the ground and into a car. As they sped away, they tied him down and covered him with a blanket in the back seat. This wasn't your average abduction. The man in the back seat was one of the world's most notorious war criminals, Adolf Eichmann, a Nazi official who helped Germany carry out the mass murder of 6 million Jews during World War II. For years, he had evaded authorities and lived in a relative peace in Argentina. Now he was in the custody of Mossad, Israel's secret service, and his once secret crimes were about to become public knowledge.
So thank you so much for reading. What this did was it reopened the wound in Israel about the Holocaust, because they just wanted to be the new Jew, to move forward, to be a secular people, not to look at this anymore. So it's really interesting that it brought back to the human consciousness what was really going on. So there's also a great book called Eichmann in Jerusalem, and it's very well done by the author about what happened. So tons of evidence comes rolling in to this international trial. All the nations were like, you have no right to extract this guy from another country and to put him on trial in Israel. But that's exactly what happened, and it was all televised. So every night, this was what everybody was watching and being fed. So Eichmann's capture, interrogation, and trial were part of one of history's most ambitious secret missions. The logistics of capturing were incredible, says Guy Walters, authors of Hunting Evil, the Nazi war criminals who escaped and their quest to bring them to justice. It's like a movie plot that occurs in real life, and it woke up the world to the Holocaust. But that awakening and Eichmann's capture was decades in the making. When he first joined the Austrian Nazi Party in 1932, few would have predicted that Adolf Eichmann had a future as a mass murderer, but Eichmann was both a skillful bureaucrat and a committed to anti-Semite. He rose swiftly through the ranks of the party. By 1935, he was already helping the Nazis plan the answer to the so-called Jewish question, Nazi terminology for the debate of how European Jews should be treated. So my question is, what was Eichmann's defense? That's it. He said, I was just doing my job. I was just a bureaucrat. All I did was the job I was told to do. Can I get a reader for this slide? All right, we'll get you for the next one.
So he later claimed that he was just following orders. Eichmann helped the Nazis tackle the logistics of mass murder. He attended the Wannsee Conference, the meeting at which a group of high-ranking Nazi officials coordinated the details of what they called the final solution. Though he did not make decisions there, he took notes on the conference and prepared data which were used by higher-ranking officials to determine exactly how to murder Europe's Jewish population. After the conference, Eichmann helped implement the genocide, coordinating the deportation and murder of hundreds of thousands of Jews in German-occupied areas. But though many of the architects of the Holocaust were arrested, tried at Nuremberg, and executed after the war, Eichmann escaped justice. After his capture by Americans as the war ended, he escaped, changing his identity multiple times as he traveled throughout post-war Europe. In Italy, he was given aid by Catholic priests and bishops with pro-Nazi sympathies, and he reached in Buenos Aires, Argentina in 1950.
So it's an incredible situation. He bounced around all over Europe, kept changing his name, and the people who helped him were the Catholics, so that they could get him down to Buenos Aires, Argentina by 1950. So it's amazing because he got there, he lives there another whole decade working for the Mercedes-Benz factory. And this is the guy who planned the railroads, planned the death camps, planned the concentration camps, and planned how do we deal with this Jewish question. So it's incredible how far removed his mind and heart were from what he was doing at his job. But this is where he lived in 1960 when he was arrested at San Fernando, Argentina. Jesse was going to read next, I think. Can you read this okay? Okay.
There was a new state that was very interested in arresting Eichmann, Israel. Thanks to Lothar Hermann, a blind Jewish refugee who had fled to Argentina after being imprisoned in Dachau, they learned of his whereabouts and began planning one of history's most ambitious captures. When Hermann discovered Eichmann was in Argentina through his daughter Sylvia, who dated one of Eichmann's sons, he wrote to Germany with the information. A German Jewish judge, Fritz Bauer, asked for more details, so with Sylvia's help, Hermann provided Eichmann's address. Worried that Nazi sympathizers would alert Eichmann to any German investigation, Bauer covertly tipped off Mossad, the Israeli Secret Service, instead. Mossad assembled a snatch team, most of whom had seen their entire families wiped out during the Holocaust, to abduct Eichmann. The goal was not just to capture him, but to get him back to Israel, where he could be tried publicly for his crimes. The plan was simple enough. As the team spied on Eichmann, they realized that his routine was extremely predictable. They decided to capture him as he walked back home after getting off a city bus after work. Carefully orchestrated plan to abduct Eichmann on May 11th, 1960 was almost foiled when Eichmann didn't get off the bus at the expected time. Half an hour later, though, Eichmann got off a later bus. Malkin and his associates accosted him on a quiet, dark street. They took him to a safe house in Buenos Aires, where he was interrogated for days before he was drugged and put on a plane to Israel.
So they literally got a pilot's uniform and put it on him, changed his looks a bit and appearance, and drugged him up, and they carried him onto a plane to get him out of the country. It was incredible. Nobody realized they even had a safe house in the country. But once again, the reason why I say God's hand is in it all, it's a lot like the transfer agreement. So here's a guy who's studying chemistry or whatever in Germany and has a girlfriend, and then he leaves the country, goes to Tel Aviv, and later he contacts her. She's now the wife of Joseph Goebbels, and arranges the transfer agreement during World War II. It's just unbelievable connections. And in this case, Adolf Eichmann, who tried to get rid of all the Jews, one of his sons accidentally dated a Jew, and that led to his unraveling. Yes.
I saw a documentary on his capture, and you can probably tell it from the picture, but his home was not near anything.
Nope.
Had it been in the middle of the city, they probably couldn't have done that. But
Right.
It was way outside of town. That's why they were able to capture him off the bus.
Yeah, he was staying in a very remote location. The trial that followed was among the first to be televised in its entirety. It gripped millions with the emotional testimony that a first-person views of realities of the Holocaust. At the trial, Eichmann presented the same deceptively normal facade he had kept up in Argentina, an image of a meek bureaucrat who simply followed orders. That image caused political theorist Hannah Arendt to coin the term the banality of evil, arguing that Eichmann was not a psychopath but a normal human. Actually, Eichmann was a rabidly zealous key Nazi who was absolutely delighted to do his bit to try to kill as many Jews as possible, said Walters. He wasn't just a functionary. Through the insisted that he would be responsible for the Holocaust, Adolf Eichmann was found guilty by special tribunal. He was hanged on May the 31st, 1962. So all through this, it's pretty amazing that he thought of himself as nothing more than just doing his job, but he was the one who actually understood all the logistics of what had to go behind it. So this leads us up to the 6-Day War. There was a lot of pressure and tension that was building up to this moment. And the reason why it's so significant is Israel didn't know that they were going to be able to get all of this accomplished in that amount of time, but also that they were going to have a big problem when they were done with this war, that they were going to be responsible for all the Palestinians who lived within their borders. A lot of them tried to escape, but the problem was the international pressure from other countries would continue to dominate till the end of the war. So do we have time to finish this slide, or are we, it's 20 after, I don't know whether, okay. All right, can I get a reader? Jason, can you read this one? Nope, too far away? Okay, go ahead.
Initially, the Johnson administration sought to convince Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser and the Soviet leadership to work toward a regional arms control regime, but neither party proved receptive. Thus, in 1965, Johnson agreed to sell Israel M4A3 tanks, followed by A4 Skyhawk aircraft in 1966. The rationale behind these sales, as National Security Council staffer Robert Comer put it, was that Arab knowledge that they could not win an arms race against Israel should contribute long-term to the dampening down of the Arab-Israeli dispute. Despite President Johnson's deep emotional commitment to Israel, he was slow to come to Israel's defense during the buildup of the 1967 war. Resolving that paradox requires understanding that the pressure created by Vietnam and the U.S. national security bureaucracy an attitude towards Israel. Johnson was the most emotionally committed to Israel of any American president, a fact that is not popularly known, but is clear from his background. As Senate Majority Leader, he tried to persuade the President Eisenhower to avoid imposing sanctions on Israel for not pulling out of the Sinai. He was also the first president to give Israel offensive weapon systems, despite opposition from the State Department.
Okay, so President Nasser, just really quick, he pictured the Middle East Arab League. It was a lot like this ISIL thing of the Levant, of connecting all the dots. And he said, I'll be the leader of all these Arab nations if I do one thing, go after Israel. And that's why he did it, in addition to saying, let's just wipe them out as being a country. But it was 7 different countries that all came against Israel just to push them into the sea and get rid of them entirely. There was a great book done by Cambridge University Press, and they sent historians to each of the countries 25 years after the war was over, because the archives were opened up and they could read the real story of what happened. The problem with the 6-Day War is that most people today think it was an Israeli land grab, when in fact they were being attacked by 7 states. So we'll pick it up from there next week. Thank you for your time. So President Lyndon Baines Johnson was from near High, Texas, which is really beautiful area of the hill country, and his grandparents were Christadelphian. The sad part of it was they sent Time magazine down there to ask the Christadelphians at High Texas Bible School, so what do Christadelphians believe? An older sister came up to the reporter and said, Christadelphians believe when you're as dead as that chair. And that's what got published in Time magazine about the Christadelphians. So not a happy response, not a glowing praise for our hope or what we believe at all, but hopefully we'll pick it up next week. Thank you for your time.